Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to explore compelling ideas from, well, all sorts of sources and bring them straight to you. Today, we're digging into Octavia E. Butler's Parable of the Sower. Now, this is a novel from 1993, but it starts its story in 2024, our current year, which is honestly a bit unsettling.
Oh, definitely. It feels incredibly relevant. A lot of people find it less like sci-fi and more like maybe a prophecy unfolding right now.
Yeah, unusually shaken is how some readers described feeling. Like it's not just predicting something, it's actually happening.
Exactly. It's quite eerie, her foresight.
So before we jump into that world she built, let's just take a moment to talk about Octavia E. Butler herself. An amazing figure.
Truly groundbreaking. An African-American science fiction writer, the first in the genre to get a MacArthur Genius Fellowship, plus 2 Hugos, 2 Nebulas, just incredible achievements.
And she was carving out the space, as one of the very few women of color in a field dominated by white men, certainly back then.
Right, and she had this clear view of her work. She called them cautionary tales.
Yeah, imagining, like, our current woes progressing unchecked to their logical ends. She basically said, look, if we keep messing up, ignoring the environment, this is where we might end up.
And she wasn't just guessing. She was a really meticulous researcher, clipped news articles, constantly connecting the dots between, say, environmental problems and social breakdown.
I read she even took out specific essays about climate change from early drafts because she wanted to show the collapse, not just to explain it.
That's right. Show, don't tell. And her self-description is fascinating, too. A pessimist, if I'm not careful. A feminist, a black, a former Baptist, an oil and water combination of ambition, laziness, insecurity, certainty, and drive.
Wow. That complexity really comes through. Okay, so our mission for this deep dive, unpack Parable of the Sower. Themes, characters, why it hits so hard today. We've got a great mix of sources, discussion guides, academic papers, reviews, reader thoughts. The goal is figuring out why this book resonates so deeply and what it might be telling us about, well, our future. Okay, so let's step into this world Butler created. It's not like one big bomb drops and everything ends. It's more gradual.
Yeah, she called it an if this goes on future. Society just sort of unravels bit by bit. It slides from bad to worse.
And what does that look like? Well, it's near future America. There's relentless poverty, lawlessness everywhere.
Public services have crumbled. Police, firefighters, they're often corrupt, exploiting people for money.
And forget guaranteed education for everyone. That's gone. One source mentioned that even in Lauren's community, which is relatively safer, their standard of living would be below our poverty line today. Limited clean water, food, power.
And that slow, grinding decline is what feels so plausible, right? So terrifyingly real because it echoes things we worry about now.
Absolutely. And a huge driver of this breakdown is climate catastrophe. It's not just background noise in the book.
No, it's central. Unchecked wildfires are a constant threat, even used as weapons. Lauren literally has to flee through fire.
Chronic water shortages, just general environmental decay. It's pervasive.
And remember, she wrote this decades ago. She saw global warming trends back in the 80s, noticed education budgets being cut while prison construction boomed. She saw these as linked.
Yeah, that interconnectedness is key. It's the progressive disintegration she shows so well. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The economic divide. Butler saw this massive wealth gap coming.
Oh, absolutely. The rich hiding in fortified, gated communities, everyone else in poverty.
That statistic from the sources is just staggering. The 3 richest Americans holding more wealth than the bottom 50% combined. What was Butler really showing us there beyond just the numbers?
She was showing the systemic result of, unchecked capitalism and ignoring social needs. And she connects it powerfully to history.
How so?
She brings back corporate slavery, indentured servitude, and she draws these direct, really uncomfortable lines back to U.S. chattel slavery. It challenges those nice, clean stories about American history. One source pointed out, for Black Americans, the kind of sexual slavery in The Handmaid's Tale is sci-fi, but economic bondage. That hits closer to home. It's like genealogy.
That's a heavy point. And the political landscape she paints also feels familiar.
Yeah, the rise of radical authoritarian leaders. What's fascinating here is, well, how deeply she understood the currents of populism.
You mean the presidential candidate?
Exactly. Christopher Donner. His platform is about dismantling programs, bringing back jobs, and his slogan, Make America Great Again.
Written in the 1990s. It's uncanny.
It really is. Readers often say they had to check the publication date. It just shows her incredibly sharp observation of political and social undercurrents.
And layered on top of all that is just rampant social breakdown, violence, intense drug abuse.
Like the pyro addicts who get high from setting fires. It's terrifying.
Ugh.
Plus cannibalism, wild dogs.
And intense prejudice. Racism, xenophobia are dialed way up. Interracial relationships are dangerous again. Hate groups are common.
And you see these refugee crises unfolding. People forced north by climate disasters and violence. It echoes historical movements like the Underground Railroad, but also what we see with modern migrations.
There's that stark contrast, too, between the supposed safety inside the gates and the danger outside.
Right. One source brought up the Trayvon Martin case as a real-world example of how that insider-outsider divide can be deadly. It's a major theme. Butler explores the fatal consequences of walling ourselves off.
So into this collapsing world steps our protagonist, Lauren Oya Olamina.
Yeah, she's 15 when the novel starts.
Yeah.
African-American, living in one of these gated communities in Robledo, California that's slowly falling apart.
And she has this unique condition, hyperempathy syndrome.
She inherited it. Her mother used a drug called Parachetco, the Einstein powder, during pregnancy.
And this hyperempathy means?
She uncontrollably feels the physical sensations, pain, pleasure that she sees other people experiencing, not what she hears, what she sees.
Okay, so it's visual. And the doctors in her world call it an organic delusional syndrome.
Right. Which says a lot about how that society views deep empathy as a sickness, a delusion.
Okay, let's unpack this. How does a delusion become a superpower? Because it sounds incredibly dangerous.
It absolutely is a double-edged sword. It makes her intensely vulnerable. Imagine feeling someone else's agony directly. If she has to shoot someone in self-defense, she feels the bullet wound too. It can incapacitate her.
Wow. So how is it an asset?
Well, think about it. It's like a biological conscience, as one source put it. It forces her to recognize the sentience, the reality of others' feelings. She can't just become numb or apathetic like so many around her.
So it drives her compassion.
Exactly. It pushes her to connect, to gather people, to protect them. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Lauren's hyperempathy becomes a catalyst for a more humane approach, right? A counter to all the callousness. It helps her see that there's power in numbers and community.
And she's incredibly practical, too, isn't she? Especially compared to others in her community.
Oh, yeah. Her father even notes they had trouble thinking far ahead. But Lauren sees the writing on the wall. She starts secretly prepping, caching supplies, even teaching survival skills to kids.
Her dialogue is described as tactical, blunt, like telling people straightforward truths they don't want to hear.
You smeared at that last time I said it, but it's true. That kind of thing. But crucially, she's also building community, even as everything falls apart. That's quite different from a lot of bleak dystopias. There's a core of hope there, of connection.
Which leads us to Earthseed, this new belief system she starts developing.
Yeah, the absolute core of it is the statement, God is change.
God is change. What does that mean exactly?
For Lauren, it's the only lasting truth. She's not talking about a supernatural being up in the sky.
Right. She says Earthseed deals with ongoing reality, not supernatural authority figures.
Exactly. Instead, God is something that exists to be shaped.
So what does this all mean? How does God is change transform traditional notions of faith? It sounds very active, not passive.
It is. It puts the power, the agency, right in human hands. You encounter change, you shape change, and in doing so, you shape God, you shape reality. It's a profound shift.
And Earthseed isn't created in a vacuum, right? It pulls from different traditions.
Definitely. You can see influences from Buddhism, especially the focus on compassion, easing suffering, non-cruelty. Also maybe Taoism, some matriarchal religious ideas, and Yoruba traditions too. Her middle name, Oya, is a Yoruba river goddess associated with change and storms.
Ah, interesting connection. Are there key verses or ideas that capture it?
Oh yeah. Verses like, all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. That's huge. And also, the self must create its own reason for being. To shape God, shape self.
Shape God, shape self. Wow, it's demanding.
It is. It's about actively engaging with the world, not waiting for salvation.
And this philosophy isn't just about surviving on Earth, is it? There's a bigger goal.
Right. The ultimate destiny for Earthseed is to take root among the stars. Lauren believes humanity needs to establish communities on other planets.
She sees it as the next necessary step for humanity.
The ultimate human change short of death is how it's put.
This raises an important question. Is space exploration an escape from Earth's problems, or a necessary evolution for humanity?
That's the tension, isn't it? And it connects to another concept mentioned in the sources, black sublimation.
Okay, what's that?
It's this idea that The black body and mind have historically had to constantly transform, to sublimate, just to navigate and survive oppressive systems, social, political, even environmental. It's about resilience born from facing constant systemic pressure. It's not just adapting, it's a fundamental transformation often forced upon people.
That adds another layer to the idea of change and adaptation in the novel. So, how does Earthseed help build community back on Earth in the middle of the chaos?
Well, it fundamentally rejects individualism, insists on interconnectedness. It pushes back against hierarchies of race, gender, class, sexuality. Private property is less important than community survival. Diversity is strength.
There's that phoenix motif too, right? A phoenix first must burn.
Exactly. Symbolizing rebirth from destruction. Like some seeds actually need fire to germinate. It links catastrophe and creation.
So Earthseed isn't about avoiding suffering, because change is suffering sometimes.
Right. It's about finding a way through inevitable suffering, shifting focus from just saving yourself to collective survival, and proactively shaping that change rather than just being swept away by it. Lauren's questions about Job in the Bible, why good people suffer, that's a starting point for her creating a theology that grapples with suffering differently.
Okay, reflecting on all this, Parable of the Sower is just such a potent example of that if this goes on, sci-fi, not a sudden apocalypse, but that slow slide.
Yeah, its power is in that grounded realism. How things just get worse and worse because of choices made and paths taken. It feels rooted in the world she observed.
And the connection to neo-slave narratives feels really critical too.
Absolutely. Lauren's journey north in her journal entries directly echoes the Underground Railroad, and Butler makes explicit links between the economic servitude in the book and historical chattel slavery.
That point about how, for Black Americans, The Handmaid's Tale is sci-fi, but Parable feels like genealogy.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
It underscores the deep historical resonance of the themes Butler explores.
And her legacy is just huge. People call her the godmother of Afrofuturism. For listeners maybe new to that term, what's the quick take on Afrofuturism?
It's basically a cultural and artistic movement, a genre, that explores the intersection of the African diaspora culture with technology, science fiction, fantasy. It imagines futures or reimagines the past through a Black lens.
And Butler was foundational to that.
Absolutely. Using speculative fiction to explore Black identity, power, history, futures, offering alternatives. And the book's impact continues. There's an opera adaptation, a graphic novel that won a Hugo.
And it hit the New York Times bestseller list in 2020, decades after it came out.
Yeah, that really speaks to its enduring relevance, especially its influence on social justice thinking today.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, it feels important to remember that Parable of the Sower is book one of a series Butler never finished.
That's right. She passed away before she could complete the story, see Earthseed fully journey to the stars.
The novel itself ends not with a neat resolution, but with a new beginning, the founding of the first Earthseed community, Acorn.
A beginning, not an end. And the larger story remains incomplete.
So here's a final thought, maybe something provocative for you to consider. What does that unfinished nature tell us about the human future?
Does it suggest that the story is now ours to write?
Exactly. Does it compel us, the readers, to do more than just, embrace diversity or unite? Does it push us to think about our own role in shaping God, shaping the inevitable changes ahead, and writing that next chapter for humanity, whether it's here on Earth or maybe eventually among the stars?
A powerful question to leave things on.